Hi, friends. I'm so excited for who I get to introduce you to today. I'm sitting with my new friend, Becca Healy. And Becca, I have been following you on Instagram for a while now. And the thing that we're talking about here on the show is something I've wanted to talk about for like a really long time now. So thanks for being on the show.
Of course. I'm excited to be here and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so for women who haven't gotten to meet you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Yes. So my name is Rebecca Healy. I'm a certified nurse midwife, which means I provide full spectrum women's health care from your very first period all the way through menopause. That includes your annual checkup, birth control, consultations, fertility, prenatal care, of course, labor, birth, and delivering babies, and then postpartum care. I am also a mom. I have a vibrant 3-year-old. And like Stephanie, I also struggled with infertility. So I do have some IVF babies waiting for me in the freezer. And then in what little spare time I do have, I spend on Instagram. I run a women's health account on Instagram where my goal is to provide free, high quality, evidence based information all about women's health.
I
Oh,
love
and a fun fact.
Yes, fun fact.
Yeah, the fun fact is I didn't always start in healthcare. I actually started as a music major. I played the cello, guitar, piano, and then I sang. And through all of that, I was able to produce a gospel music album, which is still being sold today. So there's a little fun fact.
Oh my, okay, that is an epic fun fact. That
Yeah.
is a really good fun fact.
Yeah.
On the album, did you do all of the above on the album or were you just
So I did mostly singing, and then I had a friend play the piano. And then there's also a male voice on the album who was one of my good friends at the time. He did a lot of the guitar. There's a cello song that I did, and then I did some of the guitar work on the album as well.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
that is very cool. I also need to ask, do you know how many babies you've delivered at this point?
Um, how many have I delivered? Hundreds of babies. I don't have an exact number. I probably should keep track, but it's definitely in the hundreds. But it still feels like the first time every time. It's still, it never gets old, and it's never just another day for me. It's always exciting.
That's so cool. That is so cool. So I wanted to have you on today because I would love if you would teach us how babies are made.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds crazy. And I know when I sent you over the questions, I was like, I know this sounds like a joke, or I know this sounds crazy, but I'm very serious because I think that here's at least for me,
Mhm.
the last time I had a health class, like a comprehensive, here's what's in your body, here's
Right.
how your reproductive system works, I was a senior in high school.
Yeah.
And I think I was supposed to take it earlier, but I like pushed it off till senior year. And I remember just being like wildly uncomfortable during it, like just trying to not make eye contact with anyone. And I don't know. And really I don't know what I was like. I wasn't applying any of it to myself. I basically was just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And so
And
that's the last time I've had any sort of health training. And then after that, I mean, we're concerned with like our periods and, when they cut and more just for how they're disrupting our lives,
yeah,
it's like life disruption management when it comes to your period. And then like trying to not get pregnant.
exactly.
That's kind of the goal. And so when it came time for my husband and I to start talking about like, we actually want to have a baby, I honestly didn't know how anything in my body worked.
Mhm.
And there are still some things, even after having 2 babies, going through all kinds of fertility, like treatments and operations and things.
Mhm.
There are some things I think that you're going to tell me today that I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So we just don't know this. And really, it was a girlfriend of mine that first told me that you can't get pregnant every day of the month. And then I told another friend that. And so there are 4 babies that exist in this world because that information was passed on to me and then I passed it on to someone else.
Definitely.
And so we could use some training in this area. So
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't think you're alone in that. Patients, friends. I just think it's one of the reasons I want to start my Instagram is women's health information is kind of taboo. And if you're not talking about it, then you're not going to learn the information. And so you're definitely not alone in that. And there is a lot to talk about. And we want to try and open the book on a lot of these things.
I love that. I'm so glad. It's good to know I'm not alone. Like it truly is the weirdest. Feels weird to be like, have two babies and go, how are babies made? But we just don't like, we just don't know. So can you tell us how babies are made 101? Like what is happening at each stage? What is in our bodies? What does that do? Teach us all the things we forgot from health class.
So it's going to get a little technical, but I think it's really important to understand your menstrual cycle, what happens on each day, and a lot about what goes on hormonally to really understand how we can get pregnant and how to make that be the quickest, easiest, most effective way to get pregnant. So, first things first, your first day of full flow bleeding during your period, not like light spotting, but actual full flow bleeding is going to be considered cycle day 1. And your cycle continues for however many days until the day before your next bleeding. And the average menstrual cycle length for women is going to be anywhere from 28 to 35 days. And so that's your cycle length. And the entire cycle is going to be divided into 2 parts. First half of your cycle, the second half of your cycle. And the first half of the cycle is called the follicular phase. We'll talk about that. So follicular as in follicle. You may have heard, or maybe you haven't heard, that women are born with all of the eggs that they will ever have in their entire life. Have you ever heard of that before?
I have heard of that. And it's really, that's like intimidating.
Yeah, very responsible with those eggs.
Seriously.
But those eggs are stored inside the ovaries in little compartments or little cells called follicles. Now, as the follicular phase starts, your body will select a few of those cells, a few of those little chambers to become candidates for ovulation. By the middle of your follicular phase, your brain is going to send hormones to your ovaries to send follicle stimulating hormone and estrogen to kind of grow up and mature those few candidates that may or may not ovulate. By the late part of the follicular phase, one of those candidates is going to be selected as the queen bee to grow and to thrive and hopefully eventually ovulate. So all of these hormones are circulating, and the dominant hormone is going to be estrogen. Estrogen is going to plump up the inside of the uterus, the uterine lining, get it soft and plush so that it's an ideal landing spot for a pregnancy if that queen bee gets fertilized. So once the follicle is big enough, your brain will tell the ovary to go ahead and release the egg. The culminating point of the cycle is ovulation. And this is done through a hormone called luteinizing hormone. Most women have heard of this, LH. It's the big ovulatory hormone. And this is the signal that tells your body to release the egg. What a lot of women actually don't know is that it takes about 24 to 36 hours for the egg to be released from the ovary once that signal is sent. So the LH surge happens before ovulation actually occurs. So the release of the prize egg, ovulation happens 24 to 36 hours after the LH surge. And that's the climax, the culmination of the follicular phase. And then that leads us to the second half of the menstrual cycle, which is called the luteal phase. So before I continue on with that, any questions, anything that you want to know more about the follicular phase?
I almost feel like I have to say like follicular phase. And then what was the second one?
The second one is luteal. So follicular is first, luteal is second. I remember follicular phase being like, if I imagine the ovary almost like a honeycomb, and the follicles are all in the ovary. And then finally, the one major follicle gets selected to be the queen bee. And eventually ovulate. So follicular has to do with the follicles. And then the second half, we're going to talk about the luteal phase and why it's called that.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Um, I think, yes, I think this all makes sense. And yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm with you. I'm with you.
All
Keep
right,
going.
let's keep going. I told you it's going to get a little dense here for a second, but it's important to understand this as we try to get pregnant. So
Yeah.
the second half of the menstrual cycle, which is called the luteal phase, is called that because it all has to do with a little something called the corpus luteum. So once the egg is released from the follicle, the shell of the egg, so to speak, is called the corpus luteum. So this shell, the corpus luteum, secretes the hormone progesterone, which is the dominant hormone of the luteal phase. Now, the egg will journey from the ovary into the fallopian tube where hopefully it will meet its match and fertilization will occur. Now, the egg can only survive in the fallopian tube for about 12 to 24 hours. So it's really important that there are some sperms waiting in there for the egg or that they quickly get there so that that egg can go ahead and be fertilized. Now, fun fact, sperm can live in the female reproductive tract for up to 5 days. So there should be plenty of opportunity, even though we're only fertile, the egg can only live for 12 to 24 hours. Sperm can live for up to 5 days if they're lying in wait for the egg to arrive. So that's when conception happens. So conception happens within 24 hours of ovulation and therefore 60 hours or so after you get that LH surge. And what's actually pretty cool is that human studies have actually shown that where it was previously thought that whichever sperm is the fastest, reaches the egg and then that's how fertilization occurs. Actually, the egg has a bigger part in fertilization than previously thought, meaning that the egg will choose which sperm she's going to allow inside. And so that's kind of a fun fact, it's not all about the sperm just getting there haphazardly, but both egg and sperm have to accept each other on a molecular level for those two to match. And I think that's important to understand when we talk about like miscarriage and things like that. Why isn't it working out? And I always explain it to my patients, especially if it's their first miscarriage. Sometimes egg and sperm, they just don't match up every time and it doesn't work out. And so I think it's important to understand that they're both trying to, on a molecular level meet up, join, and make that conception. So after that, so once egg and sperm have met, over the next few days, your fallopian tubes will roll the egg down into the uterus. And then that's where it's going to embed itself into that plush uterine lining that has been developing in the follicular phase. So on average, it takes about 8 to 9 days for this to happen after fertilization. So it takes about 8 to 9 days for that egg to slowly make its way all the way into the uterus. So we're finally in the uterus now. We've come a long day from ovulation all the way until implantation into the uterus. And once that egg has implanted, the egg and sperm are now considered an embryo. And so that's the first stage of human life. And that embryo begins making the pregnancy hormone we all know as HCG. The long name is human chorionic gonadotropin, but we like to call it HCG. Progesterone from the corpus luteum and HCG sustain the pregnancy and keep it going until your placenta will eventually develop. Placenta will start taking over a lot of the functions as early as 8 weeks, but it's fully capable of sustaining a pregnancy at 12 weeks. So as you start heading into your second trimester, it'll be fully placenta, and progesterone isn't as important at that time. So does that help kind of explain the menstrual cycle, how egg and sperm meet, and when that embryo kind of takes over?
Yes. And so if it doesn't, if the egg isn't fertilized, then it just,
Yeah.
what happens?
So, yeah, if the egg is just chilling in the fallopian tube and there's no sperm to meet it and no sperm arrive within time for her life cycle, then she doesn't get fertilized and your body kind of like waits for a little bit. But if the egg does not implant, the HCG does not sustain the progesterone from the corpus luteum. And if there's no HCG, then there's no progesterone. The progesterone levels will drop. And that signals your uterus to shed that plush uterine lining because no baby, clear out the space, start over next cycle. And so that's what your period is you're shedding that inside of your uterine lining because no baby was there. And then you go ahead and get your period and the entire cycle starts over. So it's a negative feedback loop. And I have like graphics and stuff on my Instagram page that you can look at how the hormones wave. But basically, we talked about how the first half of the cycle, the follicular phase, high in estrogen, plumps up that lining, and then progesterone comes once you ovulate. If you get fertilized and that HCG rises, progesterone rises with it. If you don't, that progesterone plummets, the uterine lining sheds, and that signals the body to start the process all over again.
That is, I do need some graphics. So we're going to over to your Instagram because now I'm like, how does what do the fallopian tubes look like? How is everything connected?
Yeah.
But so I feel like it's like, you got to see it. And
you gotta see it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. That's super, super helpful. This is sort of tangent a little bit, but I know that there are people who talk about your cycle and the way that it impacts your life, like all those hormones that you're talking about going up and down. And I think that there have been times in my life where I've felt very controlled by those things. Like I know when my period's coming because I feel it in every corner of my life. And then there are times where I'm like, no, I'm not paying attention to that. I'm just living my life. Like I'm not allowing myself almost to be on kind of a constant roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
How much does that, how much do those hormones impact how we feel?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And especially when I'm doing birth control consultations, we talk about, the change in the hormones and how you can expect to feel on different hormones. Progesterone is typically known as a downer hormone, typically slows things down. That's why in the first trimester, when you have such high levels of progesterone, you're just feeling so exhausted. Your GI tract is moving slower than normal. I've actually seen women kind of struggle with depression or issues like that in the first trimester because of high levels of progesterone, whereas estrogen is kind of known as the glowy pregnancy hormone or the happy hormone. We see this also being manifest during menopause. In menopause, our estrogen levels drop off significantly, extremely low on estrogen. And so one thing that a lot of women don't consider with menopause is, depression, mood disorders, and things like that. And so as the estrogen and progesterone levels are fluctuating in the small space of 28 to 35 days, it's normal to expect to see some mood swings. And then, of course, during your period, when that progesterone level drops off so suddenly, that's why we get PMS. That's why we're feeling all these things, because it's a roller coaster. It literally is. Even the graphics, it looks like a roller coaster.
I think maybe I need to be a little bit kinder to myself about that. That it's this is a very real thing that's happening in our bodies.
Definitely. You're not making up.
Yeah. It's not something we can talk ourselves out of. And so being just cognizant of it seems like a really much kinder way to go about it.
And I think with a lot of things, the more we know and the more we understand about our body and the more things make sense to us, the better we are able to cope with that information and feelings. And even with infertility, I felt like a way that I was able to cope is just really getting down to the nitty-gritty details and understanding how amazing science is and how amazing the body is and how amazing we're created to be able to have the help of science, but then also incorporating what we know about our body. So it is kind of miraculous. And I think understanding it sheds a light on a lot of things in life, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think too, there have been times where I've marked the calendar or the whole time we were trying to get pregnant, I was watching my cycle really closely. And so then you almost have a heads up that if you are starting to feel kind of funky, there's a reason,
Yeah.
and whereas instead, I think for years I was like, I feel weird. What's wrong? As everything's wrong. It's like, no, if you just wrote it down, you would see on the calendar that they're like, you might feel a little funky. And if you don't, that's great. But if you do, you at least know you're not crazy and you're not making it up and all kinds of things.
Mhm.
So what happens if we are thinking about trying to get pregnant? One of the first things that I wondered was before we, stop taking our birth control or, take out our IUD or, whatever form of birth control we're using, stop using condoms. Do we need like a checkup? Like, is there some sort of, I don't know, like, it feels like someone should give you the go ahead to start trying. Like, can my body do this? Is it ready to start trying? I don't know. Is there a pre-pregnancy checkup that you're supposed to do?
Yeah, I think it depends on your own specific health history, what you have going on in your medical history. Whether or not to schedule a specific preconception visit largely depends on, do you have risk factors like high blood pressure? Do you have pre-existing diabetes? Do you have like a family history of genetic conditions, history of sexually transmitted infections, all of these things. But if you're just like a normal, healthy, you don't have any issues, you're young, it may not be 100% necessary to go in for someone to tell you what you already know. But at the same time, it's good to always have your annual checkup. 50% of pregnancies in the United States are unplanned. And so, really, every time you see your primary care physician or your women's health provider, like be that midwife, OBGYN, women's health nurse practitioner, whomever you see, they should always be doing some sort of preconception counseling and, asking you, are you on birth control? Are you considering coming off of it? Reviewing your medication list, and things like that. And so, I guess it just depends is the answer. I mean, it's never a bad idea to go in and get a preconception visit, but don't panic if you happen to get pregnant and you're like, oh, I didn't go see my doctor first. Because, if you're just getting your general checkups from your women's healthcare provider and you're a generally healthy person, it shouldn't be an issue. That being said, if you do have an extensive medication list, you'll want to review that with your prescriber to make sure that they're going to be compatible with pregnancy. And then something that I talk about in my annual checkups with women, even if they're not planning pregnancy, knowing what I know about pregnancies, I recommend all pregnant women all women in general take a daily women's vitamin, whether that's a prenatal or a women's vitamin. It doesn't matter. They're all going to have some sort of folic acid in there. So, regardless of family plans, but especially if you're sexually active, I just recommend taking a daily vitamin. You never know.
Talk to us about folic acid and why that's important real quick.
Yeah. So, specifically for women who are planning to get pregnant, I recommend starting a prenatal vitamin about 3 months before you start trying. Some studies have shown that if you take your prenatal a little earlier, you're increasing those micronutrients that maybe you were deficient on. So when you get into your first trimester and you're not really feeling like eating or doing anything healthy at that point, at least you've been prepared. And some studies have actually shown that it can decrease your risk for morning sickness and stuff like that. But the reason that folic acid is so important is that it's the only micronutrient that has been proven to decrease neural tube defects like spina bifida and other developmental issues with the spine. And the most important time to start taking a prenatal is before you even know you're pregnant, because the spine is one of the very first things that develops. And so if you're taking that folic acid, you have it on board, then, you're going to be covered, whether, it was a planned pregnancy or an unplanned pregnancy. The most important part for fetal development, organ development is going to be in that very first trimester. And along those lines, if you are consciously trying to get pregnant, I also recommend like cutting out alcohol or other things that could affect organ development.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation for a prenatal?
Really, anything with folic acid. The recommendation is 400 micrograms of folic acid daily. And if your prenatal has it, there's kind of, I even hesitate to talk about this because I don't want to open a can of worms, but there's a folate versus folic acid debate going out there. But I'll just say this, that Folic acid is the only micronutrient that has been specifically studied and proven to prevent neural tube defects. And so just check the ingredients on your prenatal. And if it has at least 400 micrograms of folic acid, then you're probably good. I have my favorites as far as taste goes. But really anything on the market is going to be enough, whatever fits in your budget and whatever you have access to.
Okay. Okay. We'll get your favorites later. We'll
Okay.
put this in the show notes.
Okay.
Okay. So when we stop taking birth control, and I think maybe the answer is different depending on what kind of like preventative measures we've been taking.
Yeah.
Can we get pregnant right after we stop, or is there sort of a transition time where your body has to recalibrate before it can get pregnant?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it totally depends on what birth control you're taking. Like, obviously, if you're using condoms or like natural family planning, then there's going to be no change in the hormones of your cycle. So, whenever you stop using those methods, you could get pregnant. Same goes for the Paragard copper IUD, which is also non hormonal. Really shouldn't affect your cycle length or your ovulation. And so, you should be able to track that as you normally would. And then on the other hand, like totally opposite end of the spectrum, the Depo shot is a form of birth control, a form of progesterone only birth control. It can take up to 18 months to get your full fertility back with the Depo. So I always try and counsel my patients on that if they are choosing the Depo, that if they're planning a pregnancy in the near future, maybe it's not the best choice for them. That being said, the average return to fertility with the Depo is about 10 months. It's designed to work for about 3 months, but we can never guarantee when your fertility is going to come back after the Depo because it's an injection and everyone is going to metabolize it a little differently. And so that one is a little harder. As far as the pill goes, which is the most popular form of birth control, return to fertility is going to be rapid. There's no need to wait to try to conceive. You don't need to like do a birth control cleanse or anything like that. What I do recommend is stop your pill on your first day of scheduled bleeding. So cycle day 1, just to make it easier for tracking your cycle, because your full flow bleeding starts on cycle day 1, and that way you can count and track and know when you're going to be ovulating and know when to anticipate your next period. That being said, it may take you about 3 cycles or so after coming off the pill to really understand your cycle. If you've been on the pill for a while. Same thing goes for other combined methods like NuvaRing, the birth control patch, things like that. And then as far as the IUDs go, the hormonal IUDs, which are again another super popular option, Mirena, Skyla, Kyleena, etc. The return to fertility could literally be immediate. Like you take it out and your body's like, I'm going to ovulate in 3 days, and then you can get pregnant right away. Or, it can take about a month for your cycles to come back to normal. But just like with the pill, it may take like 1 to 3 months to kind of figure it out. The 3-month rule is not evidence-based. There's no rules to any of this. Who knows what your body's going to do? But, based on what we do know, it should be, back to normal within about a month or so.
Okay. That's super helpful. Well, so you talked us through our cycle and the fact that we have our queen bee egg ready to go for you said 12 to 24 hours, right?
That of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how do we, when it comes to trying to get pregnant, I think that at least in my conversations with friends, there are people who are just doing this sort of we'll see what happens kind of method. And so they aren't on birth control anymore, or they're not preventing in any way, but they're not, timing anything, or, they're just, kind of living life and seeing what happens. But then I also have a lot of friends, and I mean, this was what we did for a really long time, who are like, I'm ready to get pregnant now. And knowing that, we only have such a short window, I feel like it's so easy. If you only have one day, it's so easy to miss that day. And so we were really trying to track. So how do you track? How do you know when you can get pregnant if you're really trying to be intentional about it?
Yeah, and so this takes us back to the first question on really understanding the menstrual cycle, the hormones of the menstrual cycle, and all of that dense information from the beginning. But the best way to pinpoint, the easiest way to get pregnant, your chances of success is to know exactly when you're ovulating. Now, there's a simple way and there's a less simple way to do that. The very, very simplest way is to estimate when you ovulate retrospectively. So basically, that means you're going to look back at your last few cycles and understand that most women are going to ovulate 14 days prior to cycle day one because the luteal phase is more predictable than the follicular phase. So, for example, in a perfect world, if someone has a 28-day cycle, they count back 14 days, they will probably have ovulated on cycle day 14. If someone has a 35-day cycle, you count back 14 days, she probably ovulated on cycle day 21. So not everyone's going to ovulate on the same day, but what we do know is that in healthy women, the luteal phase is typically about 14 days. That's why if you're using the calendar method, you can only look back retrospectively after it's already happened. Whereas most women have been taught that, like, oh, you ovulate on cycle day 14, only if you have a 28-day cycle, you do. But in some women who have like 32-day cycles, she's going to be ovulating a few days after that. And that's when a lot of women miss their window and they come to me for like, oh, I can't get pregnant. And it turns out they've been tracking their cycles wrong all along. The more foolproof way, which is a little more intensive, is going to be LH monitoring. So we talked about the luteinizing hormone. We talked about that hormone will spike about 24 to 36 hours prior to ovulation. And so there are easy at-home ways to track this spike. And then you can estimate, okay, I know I'm going to drop an egg in 24 to 36 hours, so we better make sure there's some sperm waiting for her. And so you can kind of like do timed intercourse and plan for that. And that's going to be the most accurate because you're not guessing, you're not counting. It doesn't have to be retrospective. And you can just start that today. So the way to do this at home is you can get your own test strips. You can get them at any pharmacy. They're usually cheap in bulk on Amazon. But I think it's also really important to know how to accurately check your LH. And when you pee on the stick, it's just like a pregnancy test. You pee on the stick and the LH test will always be a little bit positive. So you might be like, oh my gosh, I'm cycle day 10. Why am I ovulating already? It's always going to be a little bit positive because we're always going to have a little bit of that luteinizing hormone. But we want to look for the test that is most positive. That is the darkest positive. And so what you'll do is you'll keep taking the test. And I recommend taking pictures of the test that you do so that you can like put them side by side and kind of compare like, oh, is this one darker? Is it getting lighter? Eventually, you'll have a really dark test. And then after that one, your test will progressively get lighter and lighter. And then you can pinpoint, yep, I ovulated on cycle, I got my LH surge on cycle day 15. Now I know I'm going to ovulate either cycle day 16 to cycle day 17 or something like that. And so it's not just, oh, I ovulated the day I got my positive LH. You're actually ovulating 24 to 36 hours after you get that positive test. So LH fluctuates just like a bunch of other hormones in our body, depending on what time of day it is. So I recommend checking your LH around noon, around lunchtime. That's when you're most likely to catch that surge. If you're really going to be obsessive about it, you could check twice a day. Like you could check first thing in the morning, first thing in the night to make sure you don't miss, the peak surge. And make sure, like if you've been doing this for a while and you really want to pinpoint it, you could try doing it that way. And then you can also tell from your body when you're going to ovulate. Another sign of fertility you may have heard of is cervical mucus. So if you've been trying to conceive for any length of time, you've probably seen that on the internet. You've probably seen people talking about egg whites and stretchy and like, what the heck does that mean? And this is because estrogen levels are going to be at their highest. We talked about how estrogen plumps up the uterine lining, gets it ready for as soon as that egg is fertilized, we're going to be prepared for it. So estrogen is going to be at the highest peak about 1 day before you ovulate, so that once you ovulate, everything is set and ready to go. And that high level of estrogen is going to start to thin out the mucus that protects the inside of the cervix. It's going to make it nice and stretchy. It's going to make it clear, and it's going to make it permeable to sperm. If the mucus is permeable to sperm, then the sperm can swim up through the uterus and into the fallopian tube where they can meet the egg. If the cervical mucus is not thinned out, then sperm have a really, really hard time actually getting inside the uterus. So that's another thing women look for, is my cervical mucus thin, stretchy, clear? Are the sperm going to be able to get in there? But again, very subjective, hard to monitor, kind of messy if you're not into that. And so all in all, I would go with the LH method.
I never understood the cervical mucus thing. I mean, I researched it. I knew the things, but that was never helpful to me. But the LH strips definitely
It's so
were.
subjective too.
But what does stretchy mean? I don't know what stretchy means. I've never paid attention to this before. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, that's super helpful. And we're gonna we'll make sure to get a recommendation of some test strips from you. So we'll make sure to have those in the show notes too. That was another thing that truly babies have been made because of girlfriends passing on this information. Like my friend Hannah, who's been on the show a bunch, was like, okay, you can only get pregnant a day a month. And you figure out what that day is through these strips. Here's the ones here are the ones I used, buy them on Amazon. And I mean, truly, it's like, I don't know. That's why I knew we had to do this episode, because I'm like, where are people supposed to find out these things if they don't have a girlfriend telling them? And I mean, I have bought LH strips for people in my life that I really love because no one told them either.
Yeah. And I do want to add that knowing when you're ovulating is only half the battle, right? Because we have to make sure that the other half of the equation is there, that there's sperm there to meet the egg. And so, when are we supposed to have sex? We know that the egg only survives for 12 to 24 hours, but we know that sperm can survive for up to 5 days. So is there such thing as too much sex when trying to conceive? I recommend every other day. I don't want you having sex all day, multiple times a day, wearing yourself out, because it can sometimes do more harm than good. So what I typically advise my patients to do is to start actively trying 5 days before you think you're going to ovulate, because we know sperm can last for at least 5 days. So any sooner isn't going to be productive. Obviously, you can do it for fun, but if we're doing it just to try to conceive, 5 days before you think you're going to ovulate, start having sex every other day. If you do it any more often, you run the risk of taking the fun out of it, and men can actually have decreased sperm count if they're having sex too often. And so just to make sure that you have the best chance every time you do have sex, every other day is going to be the key. If you're only going to have maybe you're super busy or your husband's out of town or something, and you're only going to have sex 1 day of the month, the best day would be the day of the positive LH test, because you're going to drop an egg within the next 24 to 36 hours, and there's going to be some sperm in there waiting for it. So but otherwise, it's better to have sex before ovulation than obviously after, because we do have such a short time frame on that. So that's something to add why the LH strips are so important, is so that you can know when to time intercourse.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have so I mean, this everything that you just said about timing everything and all of it, it's bringing back so many memories, because we did this for so long. Do you have an app that you to keep track of all of this?
So really any app is going to work. There actually is an app. I have my phone right here. I'm going to look at it. The reason I like this app, I think it's called Premom, Ovulation Tracker by Premom. I've recommended this to some of my patients. The reason I like this one is because you can actually take pictures of your LH test strips and it will like organize them for you and tell you like, hey, this looks really dark. And then you don't have to like be squinting at the test and like keep your pee sticks in your drawer. And so for me, that's what I would like. But really, like even your regular calendar, you can keep track of your period on, for, if you're going to do the calendar method or whatnot.
Yeah.
But apps do make it like a ton easier. And so the app is called Ovulation Tracker by Premom.
Okay. Okay. That's awesome. I'm trying to remember which ones I used. I think I used Ovia. Is that one?
Oh yeah, I've used that before. I've like used all of them,
Yeah. I'm like, I've
fertility
definitely,
people. We've tried everything. So
yes, we really have.
I've used Ovia, I've used Fertility Friend, I've used Period Tracker, I've used Glow, I've used Premom. So
Yeah. 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 Right there with you. One of the things, and I know you're going to understand this, but one of the things that I think was hardest about not getting pregnant every month is that on my apps, I would be like reading all of the articles, and every month I would look up what are the symptoms of early pregnancy. And I remember one time in particular, it might have been the first time we really tried. There was this, I almost said this is too much information. This is girls' night. Welcome, everybody. If you're new to the show, this is girls' night. Um, there, one of the symptoms was like pre-implantation bleeding.
mhm.
And so it was like, you might just bleed like a little. And Carl and I were going somewhere with some friends. And I think it was before my period was supposed to start. And I was bleeding like a tiny bit. And I like came out of the bathroom, like freaking out. And I was like, oh my gosh, Carl, like I think that this is happening. And so we went about that whole night feeling like we had this secret that like we were pretty sure I was pregnant. And like, of course I wasn't.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, they're like, your boobs are probably going to hurt. I'm like, my boobs hurt every month. Or like, you might feel crampy, or you might feel fatigued, or you might feel a little nauseous, or whatever. All of those things are also PMS symptoms. And so I guess like talk us through what we should be doing as we're waiting to find out if we're pregnant, and like, how do we know if it worked?
Yeah. So we talked about implantation a little bit previously. See, we keep going back to that first part, but typically implantation, after the egg has rolled down the fallopian tube into the uterus, it's going to implant about 8 to 9 days after fertilization. We know that fertilization happens a little bit after your positive LH test. So if you're going off of the day you got your positive LH test, that's going to be 9 to 10 days after your positive LH. You should get your period, like we said, 14 days after ovulation. So it will be about 4 to 5 days before your expected period is when, if you're going to see a little implantation spotting, that's what it would be. And the reason for implantation spotting is, there's a lot of blood flow in that endometrial lining. It's plush, it's thick, lots of good blood flow so that embryo can thrive and survive. And so as it kind of like buries itself in there, a little spotting might slip out. Doesn't happen to everyone. And honestly, if you were not like waiting and looking for it, you probably wouldn't notice it. But as far as when to take a pregnancy test, over-the-counter pregnancy test that you're going to get at your pharmacy or Target or whatever can pick up an HCG level as low as 25, which is really low. So they're great options. My preference is the digital because I'm known to like make something out of nothing and just like squint and like, oh, I think it's positive. No, it's not positive. So I learned a while ago, and I like recommend my friends just get a digital and save your brain some trauma. But as far as when to take it, you can technically start taking a test as soon as you want, like a week after ovulation. But I would recommend waiting until 2 days before your period, which is really hard to do, but I think it's going to save you a lot of money and a lot of
They're really expensive.
yeah, they are. They're a lot of money. And like, if you're testing every day, like a week after ovulation, and baby doesn't even implant until like 5 days before your expected period, I wouldn't like, don't even bother testing before then. So that's good to know. But we really want to make sure that those HCG levels get up to like at minimum 25 to even be detectable. So your best chance of getting a true positive, if you're going to get a positive, would be at most 2 days before your expected period.
it is so long to wait.
I know. It's like eternal.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I'm trying to think when we finally were pregnant after we did IVF, I remember them calling us and telling us that they were like, your HCG level was, and I can't remember what they said, but they were like, we'd call it positive if it was this, and it was like 10 or I don't know, something like that. Is it 10? And they're like, yours is like 400. I was like, whoa, okay. And then they were like, we're going to have you come back and test, like, we're going to test your blood a couple days later just to make sure that it's like gone up. We're hoping it's going to double. And then mine quadrupled. And they were like, so we just need to tell you every once in a while, this is an indication of multiples, not necessarily, but sometimes. And it definitely was for us.
Yeah, it brings back memories for me. And I remember my fertility center telling me, don't take a home pregnancy test. You need to wait for your blood test and, we'll trend your increasing levels, make sure they're doubling, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, that's never going to happen. Like, I'm never going to wait. So I had all my pregnancy tests ready, 2 days before the beta test. And I was like, I got my positive and I was like, so happy. And they're like, did you test? And I was like,
No, I didn't. No,
no idea.
I didn't test because they said that they're like, you could get false positives because you're so jacked up on hormones. Like,
I was just I don't even care. I know. I'll tell you, wait 2 days before your period. But then when it's me in that situation, I'm like 30 tests later.
Yeah. They're like, what is it? Like $14 for 2 or something like that? Like they're not.
Half the time it's 25,
Okay. Maybe I didn't buy very many because I was like, I was convinced for the longest time that pregnancy tests didn't have 2 answers. They only had one. Like they are incapable of being positive. And so I just am not going to waste my money and I'm not going to take one. So I did take a pregnancy test after they called us to tell us we were pregnant. I wanted to see do these actually ever say positive? They do, it turns out. Okay.
But to answer your initial question about the PMS symptoms and stuff like that.
Yes. We got way off track there. Sorry about that.
It's frustrating. Yes, it's annoying, but you really do just have to wait and see because your mind is going to play tricks on you. You're going to be Googling every symptom that you see, oh my gosh, is this a sign of pregnancy? And then you want to be pregnant so bad that you're going to start feeling what you believe you should be feeling. And we see that a lot, I never have breast tenderness, but now I do. I think I'm pregnant, and it's just because you're wanting and hoping so bad for that to be a symptom. And like we said, your progesterone levels are the highest before you start your period. And so you're still going to get those signs of high progesterone, like the breast tenderness, like the moodiness, the fatigue, all that kind of stuff. Those are also PMS symptoms. But the difference between first trimester pregnancy symptoms is that progesterone will just continue to climb and climb and climb. And the HCG levels will get higher and higher, and those symptoms will, typically get worse. Everyone experiences pregnancy a little bit differently versus PMS. By that time you will have gotten your period.
That makes sense. Okay. I think like I told you, I think it was either the first or second month that happened that we were like, oh my gosh, we're pregnant. I knew I had so many friends that go before me in this, journey of becoming a mom. And they told me stuff it may not happen right away. And that is very normal. I still was heartbroken when it didn't happen right away because it does sometimes. And I think that that's one of the hardest things is that sometimes you go into trying to get pregnant and you think, well, it's taken most of my friends a year, so I have some time. And then it happens right away. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I wasn't actually prepared for that. Or you think, we really waited to start trying until we were if it happened today, if I had a baby today, we would be ready.
Right.
And then it, a couple years later, we finally got there. And so what is actually normal? What is normal when it comes to how long it takes to get pregnant?
So I think a lot has to do with, are we trying, or are we not preventing, the conversation we just had. But about 80% of couples are going to be successful at achieving pregnancy within the first 6 months. When you push it to 12 months, it's about 85. So it really doesn't increase much after the first 6 months, but it does increase. So that's why we say if you've been trying for a year and you're still not pregnant, 85% of people should be pregnant after trying for a year. So if you're not, maybe you should talk to someone about that. That being said, if you are over age 35 and so you're getting older and you've been tracking your ovulation and you're doing everything right with trying to conceive and you're still not pregnant after 6 months, I would recommend having that conversation sooner than someone who's like in their early 20s and has been trying for 6 months. I would advise them to, give it the full year versus the older we get, we do know that fertility does decline. And so it may be necessary to get an evaluation sooner.
Talk to me about that really quick because I do remember seeing, I mean, so people like say the most horrible things to you when you're trying to get pregnant. And like, I mean, things like you have geriatric eggs or things like that, which that's a medical term, right? But it's horrible.
Yeah. I guess.
What a
maternal age.
It's, geez. I do remember seeing a chart when we were going through an IVF class about your like egg quality as you get older. And I think that I remember feeling like just this whole wave of hope because it seemed like your egg quality stayed pretty or like didn't decline super rapidly until older than I thought you were.
Yeah. As far as like super rapidly, right? So we do know that age is a factor when trying to conceive. You got to think, you've had these eggs since you were literally in your mother's womb. And so I think a lot has to depend on, not only how you taking care of yourself, but what other genetic and extrinsic factors in your life have contributed to your egg quality over time. There's things you can control and there's things that you can't. But we do know that your best chance is always going to be in your 20s. Early 30s is going to be fine. But then after age 35, we do see a decline. And definitely after age 40, we see a very steep decline in fertility. The average age of menopause in women in the United States is 52. That being said, women can experience premenopausal symptoms as early as 8 years prior to the onset of menopause. And so you can see that starting at age 40, you're going to see a very steep decline in your fertility as you start getting into premenopausal symptoms, low estrogen levels, stuff like that. As far as men goes, a lot of time we think, oh, men are fertile forever, like their eggs never die. But well, A, they don't have eggs, they have sperm, but small detail. But we do know that men are also most fertile in their 20s, and that does stay steady up until around the 50s, and then the sperm quality will start to drop off. So men do maintain their fertility a little longer, but peak fertility is always going to be the 20s.
That's stressful because peak readiness isn't
it's
always
not the 20s.
Okay, so when it comes to getting pregnant, this is something I Googled so much. Are there things that we, other than tracking, I guess, are there things that we can do to increase our chances of success that are like proven? Like when we're talking about cervical mucus, I feel like somewhere I saw something about taking like Mucinex or something like that. Or like, I mean, there's all, or like, how long should you lay there after you have sex? Or like different things like that. Are there, what are some suggestions that you've heard? Just because, I mean, maybe people haven't done as much Googling as I did.
Yeah.
And then what is actually real?
Yeah. So there's a lot of old wives' tales out there, and most of them don't have any evidence behind them. Half of that is because nobody's willing to study that. Nobody's willing to put the research behind it. And half of it is, research has been put behind it and the evidence is just not there. So we do know the fastest ticket. We already talked about tracking, pinpointing that ovulation, arranging that meeting, sex positions, standing on your head after sex, whether or not you orgasm, all of that stuff really doesn't make a difference. Like there's no evidence behind it. As far as taking Mucinex, other supplements, stuff like that, I think that's definitely on a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't go off like prescribing that to myself. And what evidence we do have on Mucinex and stuff like that is going to be very, very minimal and kind of like a Hail Mary kind of situation. So that one's kind of muddy. But as far as like lube, a lot of people have questions about lube in conception. There's also really surprisingly no convincing evidence on whether or not lube affects conception rates. Studies show that there's really no difference in women who use lube and women who don't use lube on time to successful pregnancy. So, if you're a woman who likes to use lube and you're nervous about it, you can always use pre-seed, which has been proven not to decrease sperm motility. But either way, it's probably not going to make much of a difference. And adding lube is not going to increase your chances either. And then we talked about age being a factor. So that definitely affects, your success rates. And then lifestyle. Lifestyle is huge. Are you living a healthy lifestyle? Smoking tobacco, recreational drug use, like marijuana, obesity, extremely low weight, frequent, vigorous, like if you're a really intense athlete, high intensity workouts, these can actually all have negative effects on your fertility, egg quality, sperm quality. Some of these effects are reversible and some of them may not be. So healthy lifestyle habits are always going to have a positive effect on your fertility overall. There have been studies on like activity level, diet. There isn't one like proven fertility diet, but there are certain things that we will recommend for improving your fertility. So for me, I recommend 150 minutes of exercise a week for all women of childbearing age, but especially if you're trying to get pregnant. So if you want to divide this evenly, this works out to about 30 minutes, 5 times a week, or about 45 minutes to an hour, 3 times a week. So just find an enjoyable way to move your body, get your blood flowing, increase pelvic blood flow, and things like that. Power walking, dancing, like it doesn't have to be anything crazy. And as far as diet goes, I just recommend eating a colorful variety of nutrient-rich foods when trying to conceive and while pregnant. So full fat dairy. So trying to avoid like low fat yogurt or like low fat milk, stuff like that. So if you're eating dairy, try and get full fats. Omega-3s like fatty fish, fatty nuts like walnuts, flax seeds are also supposed to help with fertility. Iron-rich foods. We see a lot of anemia in pregnancy, so it's good to work those into your diet when you're trying to conceive. And one study actually showed that plant-based proteins are better than animal proteins, and that probably has to do with animal proteins having high levels of trans fats and things like that. So decreasing trans fats like fried foods, animal fats, fast food, all the good stuff. And then decreasing high glycemic foods, which means high in quick sugars, like processed sugars, sweetened sodas, all of the stuff that you would typically think about. Decreasing those can also have a positive effect on your fertility. And then lastly, as far as supplements goes, I do have a list of supplements that I advise my couples who are trying to conceive take. But I think it's important to talk to your provider before starting any supplements. And it's definitely not a one size fits all. And I am able to add like more disclaimers and stuff on my Instagram, like, hey, you can take this, but I'm not telling you to take this, but you could ask your doctor if you can take this. So at the very minimum, both partners should be taking a daily vitamin. Female partner should be taking her prenatal with at least 400 microgram folic acid. And then the male partner, I always recommend taking a men's vitamin with zinc and magnesium to help with egg and sperm quality. Another good fertility supplement is CoQ10. It's typically found in the heart health aisle. I don't know, did you ever take that when you were doing IVF, Stephanie? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, you can just get it over the counter, but some studies have shown that it increases egg and sperm quality once you've been taking it for about 3 months or so. So I'll advise my dosing and schedule recommendations for that with my patients. So it's definitely something to bring up with your provider if you're thinking about getting pregnant. That's something you should take.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're doing all those things, mm-hmm. I'm sitting here and I'm like remembering all of the things that I tried and like, and no. Well, okay, here's one question I want to ask before we move on. Mm-hmm. One of the things, and I know you know this, that people say all the time is the stress. is bad for fertility. And then you go in and you go, hey, I'm not getting pregnant. And you're like upset about it. And then someone tells you that if you just were less upset about it, that maybe you'd get pregnant. And it's like, like that is so infuriating and crazy. Like, talk to me about the actual relationship of stress to fertility.
There's really no convincing data on stress actually, being a cause of infertility. Now, does high stress levels increase your cortisol level, put you into that fight or flight mode? Absolutely. But the type of stress that we're talking about that would lead to fertility issues is not the type of stress that any of us here in the United States are really going to be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Now, we all have stress. We all have first world stress. And a lot of us are going through really tough things, really tough mental health things. But if stress were a form of birth control, then the unplanned pregnancy rate in the United States would not be 50%. And so there's not a lot of good data, if you get a massage once a week that you're going to get pregnant. And a lot of us who have gone through infertility have heard that like 1,000 times over, like, well, maybe you should quit your job. And I'm like, well, maybe you should quit yours. I don't know. And so I always take that with a grain of salt and just understanding. And I think that also puts the blame on the person who's trying to conceive, like, oh, well, if you just did this, then maybe you'd get pregnant, like our mothers weren't stressed, or like our grandmothers weren't stressed, or like, people haven't been stressed their whole life, but the type of stress we're talking about isn't going to be something that we have to really work on. And of course we want to decrease our cortisol levels, but if you're moving your body 150 minutes a week, you're focusing on colorful, nutrient-dense foods, trying to decrease your stress levels where you can, a lot of that is going to have positive effects on your cortisol levels, and any type of stress that would affect your fertility can be counteracted by that. So, facials, massages, unfortunately, are not evidence-based.
I feel like we could maybe like slide that one under. Let's pretend
a little bit, but
let's pretend you didn't say that last part. Massages could help. Probably. But that's so good to hear. Like, it just is. It's the worst. Telling someone like, well, telling someone who's stressed, don't be stressed. That gives you another thing to be stressed about, and it does. It puts the blame on you. That if you just, I don't know, were handling this better, and really you're handling everything as well as you possibly can, that you'd be pregnant. So it's just, I'm glad to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that if we've been trying for a year and we're below 35, I guess if we've been trying for longer than a year and we're below 35 and we haven't gotten pregnant, that's when we should reach out and talk to someone. And then if we're over 35, 6 months. So what kinds of things, like, who do we talk to and what might be going wrong? Like, what does that process even look like?
So as far as who to talk to, I think both partners should have a workup. So according to American Society for Reproductive Medicine, 35% of infertility is caused by female issues. 35 is going to be male factor issues. So male and female infertility is actually equal. And a lot of times we just like blame everything on ourselves, like, oh, we're not getting pregnant, it's my fault. But literally, it's half female problems, half male problems. 20% of the time it's going to be both. So if you're unfortunate to, have it be both. And then 10% of the time it's going to be unexplained infertility. So it's important for you both to get a workup. And so for men, that's going to be men is a lot easier. All they have to start with is a semen analysis, make sure that they're contributing. For women, on the other hand, there's a lot of different things that we want to do. A basic workup is a basic infertility workup. Someone comes to me and she's just like, I'm not getting pregnant. First thing I'm going to ask her, are you tracking your cycles? Yes, I'm doing my LH test strips. I know when I'm ovulating and we're still not pregnant. We're going to do an ultrasound of the pelvis. We're going to make sure all of the structures in there are healthy. We may do an evaluation of fallopian tube patency. If the fallopian tubes aren't open for that egg to roll down, then the egg is getting lost. It's not able to even get into the fallopian tube. We're going to check progesterone levels in the luteal phase. We're going to make sure that the corpus luteum is secreting the progesterone that it should be in order to sustain the pregnancy until the placenta can develop. We're going to check on your metabolism, like your thyroid function. Your thyroid and your metabolism have a lot to do with the signal pathway between the brain and the ovary and that feedback loop on if all the right messages are getting sent. And then we're also going to want to evaluate for PCOS, which is a leading cause of female infertility, ovulation disorders, things like that. So it's going to be blood work. It's going to be ultrasounds. It's going to be a conversation on like, what have you tried so far? What are you doing? And then taking that information, and you may, get further workup after that. But that's like your basic, you come in for your appointment, what are they going to want to see from me?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I did all of those things. I don't remember most of them. I think probably the reason is, I mean, I know I did so much blood work, but I don't remember them coming back and saying, well, this is what's happening, because I think probably because everything looked fine, because we were in the 10% that had unexplained infertility. They were never able to figure out what was going wrong. And so
that's the most frustrating, honestly, like for me as a provider, but then also for you as a patient, because everything seems to be fine, but there's so much like about infertility that we still don't even know. It's a miracle that anyone ever gets pregnant ever, really, with how many things go on in the body. And the largest cause of female infertility is going to be problems with ovulation and endometriosis. And then the largest problems for men is going to be low sperm count without identifiable cause. Like, we don't know why you just have low sperm count. And then in the 10%, it's like, well, we just don't know, and it's hard to call a patient and be like, everything's normal. I don't know why you're not pregnant.
Yeah, it is frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
So if something, I guess, I know that the path really goes in a whole bunch of different directions at this point, based on, what comes back. But for someone who's sitting here, I think a lot of the people in my life who don't have kids yet are feeling some anxiety about, what if I can't get pregnant?
Yeah.
Because they've seen people like me and like you who have had a really hard road. And so what sort of, I guess kind of generally, because again, like it's, there are all kinds of really specific paths you'd walk down, but what is possible? Like if something is wrong, what are some options? Like, is there anything that you can share that would maybe ease their minds a little bit?
So I always say a good place to start is your regular women's healthcare provider, whether that be your midwife, your OB, your women's health nurse practitioner, someone who you already have a relationship with. Kind of tell them what's been going on. They can conduct a preliminary evaluation. All those things we talked about, most of those providers are going to be able to offer you at least that. And they can either say, yeah, we don't know what's wrong, and send you to a specialist, or they can be like, oh, your thyroid's off. Well, no wonder, and it can be as simple as a pill and you're good to go. It could be as simple as, you're getting positive LH surges, but you're not having high enough levels of progesterone. And so you're not actually ovulating. You're getting the surge, but the ovulation never occurs. And it's like, oh, well, no wonder, sometimes it's you get answers right away. And so I would wait to see the infertility specialist if your normal provider doesn't have answers for you, because as you know, a lot of infertility specialists aren't covered by insurance. They're very expensive. They're hard to get into. It's just like a whole road, but there are, the providers that you already have a relationship with that can at least get the ball rolling, get you started to feel like you're not, grasping at straws. And I will add that, while we do say a year, I will, if people are coming to me, they've been trying for 8-9 months, and I'm not going to turn them away and be like, oh, 3 more months, then we can talk about this. I'll offer them a workup. I'll offer them let's see if anything's going on and go from there. I know in my own infertility journey, it was a little before a year when I knew that something was wrong. I have endometriosis, which again is a leading cause of female infertility. And so I kind of already knew that I was going to struggle, and I didn't find out about my endometriosis until I was kind of into my trying to conceive process. And so, um, I saw a provider and I was like, I really feel like something's not right. And they were like, oh, just keep trying for the full year. And I was like, no thanks. At that point, you can shop around. Like, you don't have, like, if you're not feeling supported or answered by your provider, you can refer yourself to an infertility specialist. You don't have to have your OB or your midwife refer you to a specialist. So for me, it hadn't quite been a year, but I just didn't feel good about it. I referred myself to the specialist. I told him, hey, I talked to my OB. This is what they had to say to me. I didn't feel good about that. What do you think? I got my full workup and like, here we are, it was a good thing. So, not every provider is going to, like, whether they're an OB, midwife, whatever, they're not all going to have the same comfort level with treating fertility. Like me as a midwife, I really enjoy treating infertility and stuff like that because I've been through that. But not every midwife that I work with is going to be an expert in that. And that's okay. Not every general provider is going to be an expert. And that's why we have experts like reproductive endocrinologists who are infertility experts to refer to. And so, I think your primary care provider should be straight up with you. Like, fertility is really not my thing. I'm going to either A, refer you to my colleague who is good with fertility, or I'm going to refer you to a specialist. So I think that is something to consider. Don't feel trapped in your options, I guess, is the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but like it really, the more that I have gotten to learn about how babies are made with, aside from the small like holes in my knowledge, it really is amazing that anyone ever gets pregnant.
Yeah.
And like our bodies are just incredible and they're super complicated, but they're also usually really good at what they're doing. But in the ways that like things can get broken or might not be working, I was so amazed and I'm forever grateful to the doctors that we got to work with and for all of the science and research that's been done because the things like that can be the workarounds are just incredible. And so I think like I've seen a lot of people get pregnant who didn't think that they were going to be able to, myself included. And so I feel like there are a lot of options, right?
Yeah. And, you asked me if there was, what would I say to someone who is just trying or like someone who's been trying for a while, like any encouragement I could give them. And it would be just that science and technology has come such a long way, even from when our mothers were trying to conceive. Literally in the last few years, what we know about the human body has just expanded exponentially. And so I would just, I'm sure you can echo these sentiments, but there is hope. There really is. And you don't even know how much hope there is until you get into it and they start talking about your options. And after you've been beaten down so many times by negative tests, you kind of get discouraged and you're just like, whatever, like I'm just throwing money in the trash. Um, but there really are like so many people who care about you and who want to see you be successful. And so, my biggest plea is just to hang on to that hope and to try and trust the process and, remain steadfast through the process. And eventually, you'll definitely get that reward. Now, it doesn't work for everyone. We all know people who've done every avenue. They've done IVF. There's ways for those people to be parents as well, and nothing's perfect. But I never want anyone to give up before they've given a fighting chance.
I love that. I love that. Becca, thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you're talking about things that just don't get talked about enough because the fact that you're doing that means that we don't have to go through them alone. And these things are really hard and they're scary and they're complicated, but to know that we don't have to go through them alone makes them feel more doable. And so just thank you. And thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here to hopefully help some girls in your community and, have a girls' night conversation. It was so funny when you were talking about like, oh, maybe this is TMI, but like on my page, really nothing is TMI in my line of work. It's just like the things I talk about at the dinner table. Most people would be uncomfortable with, but that's why I'm here. It's a no judgment zone. It's totally open. You can ask any questions. So, oh, sounds like nap time's over.
Yep, I was gonna say just heard mine will wake up too. Well, I'm gonna link to all of your everything in the show notes so everyone can go follow along with you and connect with you. And just thanks again for coming on the show.
Of course, thanks for having me.